Pull over now! Good morning, officer. Is there a problem? Step out of the vehicle and keep your hands visible.
I'm cooperating, officer. What is this about?
Why are you carrying all these government devices? They are for official work duties.
That sounds suspicious. Show me your identification. Here it is, officer. You can verify it.
Sir, you are making the biggest mistake! Backup units are on the way. Do not move. You don't understand! Hands where I can see.
Marcus Reed was 50 years old and had spent most of his life serving in federal law enforcement. He was the senior director of a major federal investigative task force and oversaw important national security and criminal enforcement operations. Over the years, he had coordinated hundreds of successful investigations and worked with agencies across the country. Because of his professionalism, discipline, and leadership, he had earned the respect of many agents and investigators. Senior federal leaders trusted him with some of the most sensitive assignments in the nation. That morning, Marcus was traveling along a busy interstate highway that connected several major cities. The road was packed with commuters, delivery trucks, and travelers trying to reach their destinations. The area was known for heavy police activity because several law enforcement agencies worked throughout the region. Federal operations were often conducted along the highway, and recent criminal investigations had increased patrols even more. Traffic cameras and dashcams watched nearly every mile of the roadway. Marcus was on his way to a classified interagency briefing. He drove alone in an unmarked government SUV and wore business clothes beneath a light jacket. Secure federal credentials rested safely with him. His focus was simple: arrive on time and prepare for an important meeting. Years of experience had taught him how to stay calm in difficult situations, and he preferred solving problems rather than creating conflict. Several miles away, Officer Brandon Keller was finishing another highway patrol shift. At 38 years old, he was ambitious and eager to make a name for himself. He wanted recognition for major arrests and was known for aggressive traffic enforcement. Many officers believed he relied too much on instinct and not enough on facts. He often took control quickly and had a reputation for turning routine stops into bigger confrontations. When Keller noticed Marcus's SUV, something immediately caught his attention. The vehicle had government-style antennas and equipment, yet the driver was alone. Keller ran a quick database check but received limited information because of federal restrictions. Instead of seeing that as normal, he became suspicious. Convinced he had uncovered something important, Keller activated his lights and decided to make a stop that would soon change his entire career. Officer Brandon Keller stepped out of his patrol car with a hard look on his face. Before Marcus Reed could say more than a greeting, Keller began firing questions at him. His voice was sharp and demanding. He wanted to know where Marcus was going, why he was driving an unmarked SUV, and why there was government-style equipment inside the vehicle. The stop had barely started, yet Keller was already acting as if he had caught someone doing something wrong. Marcus stayed calm. He had dealt with stressful situations for many years and understood that losing his temper would only make things worse. When Keller asked for identification, Marcus immediately reached for it and handed it over. Along with his driver's license, he provided credentials that confirmed his government position. Marcus expected Keller to review the documents carefully and verify the information. Instead, the officer gave them only a quick glance before returning his attention to questioning him. The more Marcus answered, the more suspicious Keller seemed to become. Rather than listening to the explanations, he interrupted several times and accused Marcus of avoiding direct answers. Marcus explained that some information related to his work could not be discussed on the side of a highway. He remained polite and respectful, but Keller viewed every response as another reason to be suspicious. In his mind, the situation was becoming bigger and more important by the minute. A few moments later, Keller spoke into his radio and requested additional units. Marcus noticed the call but showed no reaction. Within minutes, more patrol vehicles arrived at the scene. Their flashing lights drew attention from passing drivers, and traffic began slowing down. One by one, officers stepped out of their vehicles and spread out around the SUV. What had started as a routine stop now looked more like a major police operation. Marcus watched quietly as officers took positions around him. He knew exactly how unusual the scene appeared to everyone driving past. Still, he kept his voice steady and his movements calm. He explained that federal personnel could easily verify his identity. A simple phone call to the appropriate office would answer every question. He even suggested the names of people who could confirm who he was within minutes. Keller refused to consider it. By now, he was convinced he had uncovered something important. The lack of information in his system only strengthened his belief. He handed Marcus's credentials back without making any effort to verify them. Then, in front of the gathered officers and passing motorists, Keller pointed toward the shoulder of the highway and gave a direct order. Marcus was told to step out of the SUV, turn around, and place his hands behind his back. Moments later, cold handcuffs clicked around his wrists as traffic rolled slowly past the growing scene. Marcus Reed stood quietly on the side of the highway with his hands secured behind his back. The flashing patrol lights reflected off passing vehicles as traffic slowed to a crawl. Drivers stared at the scene, trying to understand why so many officers were gathered around a single SUV. Some people rolled down their windows for a better look, while others held up their phones and began recording. Within minutes, videos of the stop were already spreading across social media. The growing attention seemed to encourage Officer Keller. He moved around the scene with confidence, speaking to arriving officers as if he had uncovered a major case. More patrol vehicles pulled onto the shoulder, and the area became crowded with law enforcement personnel. Keller announced that the situation might involve a criminal investigation. His words quickly changed the mood. Officers became more alert, and several began treating the stop as something far more serious than a traffic violation. While Marcus remained standing beside the road, officers started searching the SUV. They carefully examined the interior and checked every compartment they could access. Before long, they discovered several secure communication devices. There were encrypted phones, specialized radios, and other pieces of government-issued equipment. Some officers exchanged concerned looks as they inspected the items. To them, the equipment appeared unusual, and they waited for Keller's reaction. Instead of slowing down and verifying the facts, Keller treated the discovery as proof that his suspicions were correct. He claimed the equipment raised even more questions. He suggested that someone might be pretending to be connected to the government. Several officers nodded while others remained uncertain. Marcus listened quietly before speaking again. In a calm voice, he explained that federal supervisors could verify everything immediately. He told them that one phone call would clear up the misunderstanding. Keller ignored the suggestion. Every time Marcus recommended contacting federal officials, the officer brushed the idea aside. Marcus did not argue or raise his voice. He simply repeated that verification was available if anyone chose to use it. Nearby drivers and witnesses were beginning to notice the strange behavior. Some questioned why officers were refusing to check information that could quickly confirm the truth. Others wondered why a cooperative man was being treated like a dangerous suspect. As the search continued, one officer opened a secure case found inside the vehicle. Inside were official federal credentials. The officer studied them carefully and then looked again. Printed clearly on the identification was a photograph, a federal seal, and the name Marcus Reed. For the first time since the stop began, a few officers exchanged uneasy glances. The discovery was impossible to ignore, and it raised a question that none of them could easily answer. The discovery of the federal credentials should have changed everything, but Officer Keller refused to accept what was right in front of him. When one of the officers showed him the identification, he barely looked at it before shaking his head. Keller insisted that the credentials could be counterfeit. He claimed that criminals had become more sophisticated and that fake identification was not impossible to create. Instead of seeing the credentials as a reason to slow down and verify the facts, he treated them as another piece of evidence supporting his suspicions. Marcus stood quietly beside the highway as the questioning continued. The handcuffs remained on his wrists, and passing drivers continued to stare at the scene. For most people watching, it looked as though a dangerous criminal had been captured. Few knew that the man standing on the roadside held one of the most important positions in federal law enforcement. Despite the embarrassment, Marcus remained calm. He had spent years dealing with difficult situations and knew that losing control would accomplish nothing. Around them, the scene continued to grow. Traffic cameras recorded every moment while dozens of drivers filmed with their phones. Some witnesses pulled into nearby parking areas so they could keep watching. Videos of the stop spread quickly online as people tried to understand why such a large police response was focused on one cooperative man. The flashing lights, the handcuffs, and the growing number of officers made the situation look more serious with every passing minute. Meanwhile, Keller seemed more confident than ever. He spoke loudly enough for nearby officers and witnesses to hear. He announced that he believed they might have uncovered a case of federal fraud. According to him, the vehicle, the equipment, and the credentials could all be part of a larger scheme. A few officers appeared uncertain, but Keller's confidence kept the investigation moving in the same direction. The more attention the stop received, the more determined he became to prove that he was right. Marcus gave the same advice he had offered from the beginning. In a calm voice, he explained that verification would resolve everything. A simple call to the proper federal office would confirm his identity and position within minutes. He reminded the officers that facts were easy to check. Yet every suggestion was ignored. Keller refused to make the call. He believed he already knew the truth and saw no reason to question his own judgment. As the roadside crowd continued to grow, something unexpected happened. Several black SUVs suddenly appeared farther down the highway. They moved quickly through traffic before exiting onto the shoulder. One after another, the vehicles headed directly toward the stop. Officers noticed them first. Then the witnesses did. Within seconds, every eye at the scene was focused on the approaching convoy racing straight toward Marcus Reed. The black SUVs came to a stop one after another along the shoulder of the highway. Their doors opened almost immediately, and several federal agents stepped out. They moved with purpose and urgency. Officer Keller and the other highway officers watched closely, expecting the agents to help with what they believed was a major criminal investigation. For a brief moment, Keller appeared confident that federal personnel had arrived to support his actions. Instead, the agents headed straight toward Marcus Reed. The change in direction caught everyone by surprise. Witnesses lowered their phones for a moment, trying to understand what they were seeing. Several highway officers exchanged confused looks. The agents barely glanced at Keller as they rushed past him. Their full attention was focused on the man standing in handcuffs beside the road. Within seconds, a senior federal supervisor reached Marcus and stopped in front of him. The supervisor's expression immediately changed when he saw the handcuffs. He looked from Marcus to the officers surrounding him and demanded an explanation. His voice was sharp and direct. He wanted to know why Marcus Reed was being detained and who had authorized it. Keller stepped forward, attempting to explain his suspicions, but the confidence he had shown earlier was beginning to fade. The situation was no longer unfolding the way he had expected. Several agents quickly reviewed Marcus's credentials. It took only moments for them to confirm what Marcus had been saying from the beginning. The identification was genuine. The equipment in the SUV was authorized. Everything checked out exactly as it should have. One agent immediately stepped behind Marcus and removed the handcuffs. As soon as they were off, the atmosphere changed. The man who had been treated like a suspect was suddenly being treated with the highest level of professional respect. Before anyone could fully process what was happening, multiple agents began briefing Marcus on an ongoing operation. They handed him documents, provided updates, and asked for guidance. Marcus listened carefully and then calmly began issuing instructions. His voice remained steady and professional. Agents took notes as he spoke and acknowledged every directive. It was obvious that they viewed him as the person in charge. The same officers who had questioned him only minutes earlier now stood silently watching the scene unfold. The realization spread quickly across the roadside. Witnesses stared in disbelief. Officers looked at one another, unsure of what to say. Keller's earlier confidence had completely disappeared. Then the senior federal supervisor turned toward him and asked a question that brought the entire scene to a standstill. "Do you realize you're detaining the man who oversees this entire task force?" After Marcus Reed was released from the handcuffs, federal officials immediately began reviewing everything that had happened during the stop. What had started as a simple traffic stop had now become a serious matter involving several agencies. Supervisors wanted answers, and they wanted them quickly. The first step was to secure every piece of evidence connected to the encounter. No detail was considered too small to examine. Dashcam footage from the patrol vehicles was collected and preserved. Bodycam recordings from the officers involved were also gathered for review. Federal officials wanted a complete picture of the stop from beginning to end. At the same time, videos recorded by passing drivers continued spreading online. Many witnesses had captured different angles of the incident, creating a public record of what had happened on the roadside. The event was no longer limited to the officers who were present. Thousands of people were beginning to see the footage for themselves. As investigators reviewed the recordings, a clear pattern quickly appeared. The footage showed that Marcus had identified himself almost immediately after being stopped. He had provided identification when requested and had remained respectful throughout the encounter. At no point did he resist instructions or become aggressive. Instead, he answered questions calmly and cooperated fully with every order given to him. The videos supported his version of events from the very beginning. The documentation told the same story. Records showed that Marcus had repeatedly offered ways to verify his identity. He suggested contacting federal supervisors and provided information that could have resolved the situation within minutes. Those opportunities were clearly documented. Several officers who had been present during the stop quietly acknowledged that Marcus had offered multiple verification options. They also admitted that those warnings and suggestions had not been taken seriously at the time. Federal supervisors then verified Marcus's authority level in full. The results left no room for doubt. Marcus was exactly who he claimed to be. His position, his credentials, and his responsibilities were all confirmed through official channels. One by one, the accusations made against him began to collapse. Claims of deception, impersonation, and fraud could not survive the evidence. The facts showed that Marcus had been truthful from the first moment of the encounter. As the review continued, the mood among many of the officers changed. What had once looked like a major arrest now appeared to be a major mistake. Supervisors exchanged concerned looks as more evidence was examined. Then another development followed. Internal Affairs personnel formally requested every report, recording, document, and communication connected to the highway stop, signaling that a much larger investigation was about to begin. News of the highway stop began to spread quickly across television and social media. What started as a roadside incident soon became a national talking point. News reporters replayed the footage again and again, trying to understand how a federal director could be treated like a suspect. Each new broadcast brought more attention and more questions. The story moved fast, and public interest continued to grow. Community leaders were among the first to speak out. Many of them called the incident deeply concerning and demanded clear answers from the police department involved. They questioned how a cooperative federal official could be detained without proper verification. Some leaders pointed out that the situation raised serious concerns about judgment and decision-making. Their voices added more pressure to an already growing public debate. Legal analysts also began reviewing the case. On television and online platforms, they discussed whether Officer Keller followed proper procedure. Many of them questioned why basic verification steps were ignored. Some explained that standard practice in situations like this usually requires quick confirmation before escalation. As more experts gave their opinions, doubts about the officer's actions became stronger in the public space. At the same time, several federal agencies expressed concern about how the situation had been handled. Internal communications showed that leadership wanted a full explanation of why a senior federal director was detained during official travel. Supervisors began reviewing department procedures to understand where things had gone wrong. The focus was no longer only on the stop itself, but also on the systems and decisions that led to it. As public scrutiny increased, questions about profiling and abuse of authority became louder. Many people began asking whether assumptions had influenced the officer's decisions. The incident sparked wider discussions about how quickly judgment can replace facts during law enforcement encounters. The conversation was no longer just about one stop, but about trust, fairness, and responsibility. Inside the department, pressure was also growing. Fellow officers who had been present during the stop began distancing themselves from Keller's actions. Some said very little, while others stated that they had not agreed with how the situation was handled. Internal investigators started formal interviews with everyone involved. Each officer was asked to explain their role in the incident and the decisions they made during the stop. As the investigation moved forward, the consequences became clearer. What had once seemed like a confident arrest was now under serious review. Evidence, witness accounts, and official records were all being examined closely. Every decision was being questioned, and every action was being documented for review. By the end of the internal process, one final outcome was confirmed. Officer Keller was placed under administrative review. Independent investigators were assigned to fully examine the highway stop from the beginning to the end. They carefully studied every detail, including radio communication, bodycam footage, and written reports. Their goal was to understand how the situation became so serious and why basic verification was ignored. As they reviewed the evidence, it became clear that many steps that should have been taken were skipped. Department leadership came under strong public pressure. Officials were questioned by media, community groups, and government bodies about how such a mistake could happen. They were forced to explain why a senior federal director was detained without proper confirmation. Each day brought more attention, and leaders had to respond carefully while the investigation continued to grow. Civil rights organizations also stepped forward and demanded answers. They raised concerns about fairness, treatment, and the way authority was used during the stop. Many called for full transparency and accountability. Their voices added more weight to the case and increased the pressure on the department to act quickly and clearly. They also pushed for changes that would prevent similar incidents in the future. Because of the growing concerns, policy reviews were started across the department. Officials looked closely at how officers are trained to handle stops involving government vehicles or federal personnel. At the same time, other complaints involving Officer Keller were brought forward. Some of these reports described similar patterns of poor judgment and unnecessary escalation during previous stops. Training procedures also came under review. Supervisors began checking whether officers had enough guidance on how to verify federal credentials and handle sensitive situations. Oversight boards scheduled formal hearings to investigate what happened and whether proper procedures were followed. These hearings were expected to include testimony from officers, supervisors, and witnesses involved in the case. As the investigation continued, media outlets kept reporting every new update. News programs replayed footage of the stop and discussed the findings in detail. Public interest remained strong, and the story continued to spread widely. Each new report added more pressure on the department and kept the incident in the spotlight. Over time, Keller's reputation began to fall quickly. What was once seen as confidence and strong enforcement was now viewed as poor judgment. Within the department, trust in his decisions weakened as more details became known. His actions were no longer defended the way they once were. In the end, Keller received official notice that he was required to appear before a disciplinary board to answer for his conduct during the highway stop. After everything was cleared, Marcus Reed returned to his federal duties without delay. The incident on the highway did not stop the work he was responsible for. Soon after, the delayed operation he had been heading toward continued as planned. Teams across different locations moved forward with their assignments, and the mission that had been paused on the road was completed successfully. In the days that followed, reporters reached out for interviews. Many wanted to hear Marcus's side of the story and understand how he handled such a public and tense situation. However, Marcus declined most of the requests. He chose not to turn the event into a public spotlight. Instead, he focused on his work and continued serving in his role with the same calm approach he had always shown. During one of his brief stops at a federal office, a young agent asked him a simple question. The agent wanted to know how he stayed so calm while being treated the way he was on the roadside. Marcus paused for a moment before answering. His response was steady and quiet, but it stayed with everyone who heard it. He said, "Authority doesn't prove who you are. Character does." Those words spread quickly among the people who heard them. The incident itself also sparked wider conversations across communities and agencies. People began discussing how easily assumptions can influence decisions. Many talked about the importance of professionalism, patience, and accountability in law enforcement situations. The story became a reminder that judgment should always come after facts, not before them. In different places, communities had deeper discussions about verification before action. Leaders, officers, and citizens all reflected on how important it is to confirm information before making serious decisions. The highway stop became an example used in training conversations and public debates about fairness and responsibility. It showed how quickly situations can grow when assumptions are not checked. Through it all, Marcus continued his service without seeking attention or recognition. He did not use the incident for personal gain or public praise. Instead, he returned to his duties and remained focused on his responsibilities. For him, the work mattered more than the attention that came with it. In the end, the truth about the incident was remembered in simple words. The badge never changed. The credentials never changed. The authority never changed. The only thing that changed was what people believed once the truth arrived. If this story shocked you, wait until you see what happened when airport security detained a quiet traveler, only to discover he was leading a federal operation they had never heard about. One officer thought he had found a criminal hiding in plain sight, until an entire convoy revealed the truth. Watch the next story on the right.